Hi students, I hope you are all keeping fine and well at home. This is Sir Polly once again from the Department of Political Science. In the last class, we have learned about one of the most important events that took place in the world after the Second World War. And that was the Cold War. We have learned about the Cold War in great detail in the first chapter of the Contemporary World Politics. Today, we are going to learn about another very important event that took place in the world after the Second World War. And that is end of bipolarity. End of bipolarity. This we will be learning in the second chapter of the Contemporary World Politics. So well, my dear boys and girls, get ready. Let's get into a new chapter, and the name of the chapter is End of Bipolarity. In this chapter, the first topic that we are going to discuss is the meaning of polarity. In other words, what you have understood, or what is the meaning of polarity. There are three types. The first one is unipolarity, second one is bipolarity, and the third is multipolarity. In order to understand the meaning of this polarity, let us go back to the first chapter where we learned about the Cold War. You know very well, during the Cold War, the entire world was dominated by two powerful states, the US and the USSR. Such a condition or such an order where the whole world is dominated by two powerful states in political science is known as bipolarity. Bi means two. In class 10 or the lower classes you have learned in mathematics, binomials means two. And suppose if the world is dominated by one powerful country, then it will be known as unipolarity. And suppose if the world is dominated by more countries, more than 2, 3, 4 or 5 more, then it will be known as multipolarity. So these are the three types of polarities. First is unipolarity, where the whole world will be dominated by one. Second one is bipolarity, where the world will be dominated by two powerful states. And the third one is multipolarity, where the world will be dominated by many powerful states. And the second chapter's title is The End of Bipolarity. Means how the bipolarity came to an end. We have learned after the Second World War, for many years, the world was dominated by two powerful states. And we had bipolarity in the world. But what happened after many years? From the two powerful states, USA and USSR, USSR got disintegrated. It was divided into 15 independent states. It lost its power. And finally, the world was dominated by only one country, that is the US. So what happened? The bipolarity came to an end with the destruction of USSR, and the unipolarity came into being where the world was dominated by only one country, that is US. And this is that we are going to learn in this chapter, the end of bipolarity. In other words, we will be learning in this chapter how USSR came to an end. The disintegration of USSR. With the disintegration of USSR, bipolarity came to an end. I'm sure you understood the three terms: bipolarity, unipolarity and multipolarity. Before we understand actually how the bipolarity came to an end, or how the USSR got disintegrated, first of all, let us learn how actually this USSR was formed. In other words, the birth of USSR. You know the full form of USSR? USSR refers to Union of Soviet Socialist Republic. Initially, there was no country known as USSR. It was actually consisted of 15 independent states. And the states were known as Soviets. They were ruled by the Tsars, emperors. We have learned in history. During the Tsars' rule, people had lots of miseries and sufferings. And they decided to start a revolution and overthrow the Tsars. So their leader, Vladimir Lenin, formed a party known as Bolshevik Communist Party. And this party is the one which led the Russian Revolution in 1917. And with the Russian Revolution, they overturned the Tsars and established a popular government in the USSR. After the Russian Revolution, all these 15 states, all the 15 Soviets, decided to form a union known as USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republic. That's how USSR was born. It was born after the Russian Revolution in 1917. After the formation of USSR, they followed socialist system. USSR was the first country to follow the socialism. And the system that followed in USSR is known as the Soviet system. What are the features of Soviet system? In the Soviet system, almost all the means of production were owned by the government. Private ownership was actually not entertained. Everything was centered around the Communist Party of USSR. Another very important feature of USSR was that the government tried to provide minimum standard of living for everybody. It subsidized whatever required for the people, like health facilities, medicines, education. They were all given at a very, very cheap rate. There were no unemployment. Everybody had jobs. And within a short time, USSR became a very, very developed country next to USA. But what happened? Slowly, a lot of problems arose in USSR, and that led to the disintegration of USSR. And now we are going to discuss about one of the most important topics for the examination point of view, that is the causes of disintegration of USSR. Why actually the USSR got disintegrated? Disintegrated means divided into different countries. There were many causes. I'll be discussing about at least 5 causes for the disintegration of USSR. The first reason for the disintegration of USSR was stagnant economy. As I said, in USSR, almost all the means of production were owned by the government. People took it very casually. There were no competitions. There were no ownership. So slowly, all the economy declined and became stagnant. And that was one reason why the USSR got disintegrated. The second reason for the disintegration of USSR was the autocratic rule of the Communist Party. You know, the Bolshevik Communist Party was the party that brought freedom or independence to USSR from the Tsars. But after they came to power, they acted like authoritarian party. People were not allowed to form any other political party. They had no democratic rights. If anyone speaks against the party, they were punished. This was another reason for the disintegration of USSR. The third reason was corrupted bureaucrats. Bureaucrats, the government servants. As you know, almost all the means of production were owned by the government. There were a large number of government servants, and they became corrupted. And towards the end, corruption became at the peak. And that was another reason for the disintegration of USSR. The fourth reason for the disintegration of USSR was reforms initiated by the last president of USSR, that is Mikhail Gorbachev. When Mikhail Gorbachev became the president of USSR, he brought about many reforms, economic as well as political reforms. The two main reforms that brought about by him was, one is perestroika, another one is glasnost. He wanted to slowly change USSR into a capitalist society, a capitalist economy, which was not liked by majority of the people of USSR. And that was another reason for the disintegration of USSR. And finally, the last cause for the disintegration of USSR was rise of nationalism. In many parts of USSR, almost in all the estates, they wanted to get separation from the USSR. They wanted to break away from USSR and wanted to form their own independent states. All the 15 states started to have national feeling, and they wanted to break away from USSR and form their own independent states. And finally, because of all these reasons, USSR was divided into 15 independent countries in 1991. In December 25, Mikhail Gorbachev, the last president of USSR, resigned, and with that, USSR came to an end. And with that, the bipolarity in the world also came to an end. There were two powers before, now one power is gone, and the whole world came to be dominated by only one country, that is USA. And from bipolarity, the world became unipolarity. This is how actually the bipolarity came to an end. The causes of disintegration of USSR. The last topic for today is the consequences of disintegration. Because of the disintegration of USSR, what were the results? The first cause, the Cold War came to an end. The Cold War was between USA and USSR. Now USSR is no more, so the Cold War came to an end. Second consequence, or the second result of the disintegration of USSR was the power relations changed. From bipolarity, the world came into unipolarity. And the third consequences of disintegration of USSR was many new countries and powers came into being. Many new countries came into being. From the USSR itself, 15 countries became independent. They joined with other blocs, and the world is no more now dominated by two powers. It's only dominated by only one power. So these are the consequences of disintegration of USSR. So my dear boys and girls, before I wind up this video, I would like to recap the topics that we have learned today. The first point what we learned today was the polarity. There are three types of polarities. One is unipolarity, Bipolarity and multipolarity. Unipolarity means the world order where the world is dominated by one country. Bipolarity means where the world is dominated by two countries. Multipolarity means where the world is dominated by many countries. The birth of USSR. USSR was formed in 1917 after the Russian Revolution. The revolution was led by the Bolshevik Party under the leadership of Vladimir Lenin. The system that followed in USSR is known as Soviet system. It was a socialist system they followed. The causes of disintegration of USSR we have learned, and finally the consequences of disintegration. I will be coming up with some more videos related to this chapter, and till then, take care, stay home, stay safe. Thank you so much.